I'm Adrienne Enns, and I welcome you to the Intention Sessions podcast. I want to inspire our most intentional living. In each episode, we'll talk to remarkable individuals who will share their authentic journeys and their insights with us. They're going to remind us that life's complexities can be our greatest teachers, and that intentional living can be expressed in an infinite number of ways. I hope you find some inspiration for your most intentional life right here. I am very excited. Today we have Sarah Seidelmann joining us, and I want to share her bio with you to lead us off. Sarah was a physician living a nature-starved, hectic lifestyle until a walrus entered her life and changed everything. She is trained at the Beck Institute and Michael Harner's Foundation for Shamanic Studies. She is an author, and her latest book, How Good Are You Willing to Let It Get, is coming out this June. Her previous books, the Book of Beasties and Swimming with Elephants, are also personal favorites and must-reads. Sarah, was thinking about how we met, and it was actually only 5 minutes before we got on this call that I was able to totally connect it. It was I know that we have this connection because we both did master coach training with Martha Beck, but not at the same time. And then I remembered the connection point was that you had worked with a publisher who was considering my work. So I had reached out to you.
That's right.
And you were so helpful to me. I feel like I was just like a little seedling at that point, or like a little rowboat in the ocean. And you just, we set up a meeting right away. You were kind, you were informative, and we've just been connected through social media ever since. So I'm thrilled to have you here.
Oh, I'm so glad. And it's always awesome to connect with other authors and creatives like you, who are just, working to uplift and connect people.
Absolutely. So my first question is, in reading that bio, I know what people are going to want to know is that how does a medical doctor's life get rerouted by a walrus?
How does that happen? Even I was starting to go, whose life is this we're talking about? Well, it was actually a taxidermied walrus. And, there's this little shop in our downtown that I went into one day, and I noticed this giant head that was taxidermied onto the wall of this walrus. And if you've never seen most of us have never seen a walrus in real life. So the closest you're probably going to get, I don't think they even have them in zoos. I mean, I hope they don't. But anyway, this really caught my attention. And at the time, I was also simultaneously on a sabbatical from medicine, feeling really confused about my career. And I was so confused, Adrienne, that I was like, I had just read this concept, this sort of ancient shamanic concept that was the idea that any wild animal that crosses your path is likely to have a significant message that's supposed to help you. And I thought, well, that sounds insane, but I'm also very close to the brink of insanity right now because I feel so confused. I was definitely in that hero's journey, in the dark woods, not knowing what to go right or left or turn back or anything. And that walrus really encouraged me. First, I stood there and I was like, Mr. Walrus, do you have a message for me? And it was it's a radio silence. And then finally, I started to learn more about walruses because I was so taken with this one that was on the wall. And what I learned about walruses is that they're apex predators. So they're very, they really have little to no competition. They will occasionally tangle with a polar bear, but rarely because they know that's not going to end well. And the other thing is, if you've ever watched a walrus, I don't know if you've ever caught one lying on the beach, they are check them out on YouTube. They're extremely surrendered to who they are. Walruses are just laying about on the beach. They're not, you can tell it appears to me that they're not caught up in their head in anxiety about the future or in a shame spiral about the past, like I was at the time. And they're just really surrendered to being who they are, grunting, moaning, going after some clams when they get there hungry, when their appetite rises. And
Sounds pretty good right now.
I know. I was like, you know what? Like, I could use some of that. And so I sort of put those two messages together. And the message for me that was, if I could just somehow manage to accept and be myself utterly, just like the walrus was, that maybe I too would have no competition should I choose a new career. And that was a terrifying idea because, after putting 20 years into the practice of medicine, a lot of people were like, what are you doing? Like, you're not going to throw that all away, are you? Oh, you're such a good pathologist. You should stay in here forever. And I was thinking, yes, but I'm miserable. But, so anyway, that was sort of my beginning of realizing that the natural world had so much wisdom to share with me. And if I only would begin to listen, I was going to find my way.
It's amazing. And I just want to go back to one thing you just said, but because I want to hear about the next part of your journey and what you're sharing with people now. But when you were making that transition, did it feel to you like you were throwing it all away?
Actually, I didn't have a lot of attachment to it. It was more like I was scared I was being stupid. It was more
Mm-hmm.
like a terror that somehow I was going to make a big mistake and regret it. I remember at one moment where I was like, I think I'm not going to go back. And then it was at a Christmas party or something, and this orthopedic surgeon and I were talking, and he's like, "You'd be crazy to like let go of your disability insurance." He's like, what if Mark dies? I mean, he just started like, it was. I later realized, that was his anxiety, but I was like,
Yes.
oh my God, like I never considered that. That's a very terrible idea. But once I really sat with all that and searched deep inside my heart, I was like, I have to go forward. And people always ask, like, well, how did you get the courage? But I think to go backward or to return to my career at that point, I mean, I did go back part-time for some period of time, but at the end of the day, to turn away from my call to the hero's journey would have been death, kind of, I guess is the best way to put it. I just knew that I would be miserable. And I was a pretty miserable to be around then too. So, I mean, if nothing else, I was doing it for the people around me.
So tell us about the work that you're doing now. Tell us about your new book. I'm very curious to hear about it.
Yeah, I could totally tell you about my new book. So the new book is How Good Are You Willing to Let It Get? And it's sort of a daily reader. So if you're a person who sits up in the morning with a cup of tea or coffee and likes to read a page, to inspire you and get you started for the morning, that's the kind of book it is. And that title is really a question that I began to ask myself as I was on that sabbatical, because all this fear got kicked up. And I remember thinking, like, I made a prayer that summer. I wouldn't even have called it a prayer. I would have called it, like, I asked the universe, like, if I'm meant to leave medicine and do something else more creative, more, not that medicine isn't creative, but a different vocation, like, show me how I'm meant to do that financially, because I just was like, I was still a significant part of our breadwinning in our house. And 2 weeks after that, my husband got a raise for production or something, something surprising that we didn't expect, for almost to the dollar amount of my part-time salary.
Wow.
And then I was like, wow, this stuff works. Like, the universe is magic. I'm meant to like leave medicine and go do my dream and write books and like do helpful things with people. Like 2 weeks after that, I was like, I don't know if that was the sign. It might not have been the sign. And this doubt crept back in again. And at the time, I was reading this book by Gay Hendricks called The Big Leap.
Yes.
And it's this wonderful book where he talks about like these self-imposed glass ceilings that we put over ourselves, usually because we have some thought like, I don't deserve to be happy and make an income, or I don't deserve to have deep love and a minivan in the garage, whatever it is, And so I really I formulated that question with the help of my helping spirits, which by then I was starting to communicate with. And the question I wrote it on an index card, and I just started repeating it to myself. Every time I would doubt, I was like, Sarah, how good are you willing to let it get? Like, could you allow more love? Could you allow more abundance, more freedom, more, could you trust that you deserve that? And it's okay, to have a good life. It's
Mhm.
okay to get to go after what your heart longs for. It doesn't make you a bad person, which sounds kind of crazy, but that's how I felt. Like, maybe this is selfish, what I'm doing, pursuing. Maybe this is dangerous. Maybe this is stupid. And if I had the discipline, I would just go back to medicine. I mean, there's a lot of shame in it too, I think, because you feel like something's wrong with you that you didn't want to keep going for 50 years. Because there were plenty of my colleagues that were like, oh, I just love my job. I was like, that's so awesome. How do you love it so much? Anyway.
I identify with this so much on a personal level when I left the corporate world, but also, with this question, because in a lot of the conversations that I've had with people, specifically around their joy, it hasn't been this question, but I will definitely be introducing it, but they want it, but they aren't willing to open up and allow themselves to feel it. It's like we think we don't want pain and suffering, but sometimes people's willingness, myself included, to open up to the goodness and the abundance and the possibility can feel equally as fragile, but in a totally different way.
Yes, totally. I think, was it Brene Brown who said, like, joy is the most terrifying emotion of all the emotions to feel? Somebody
She
said that.
might have.
And I just thought,
It's
yeah,
true.
because I think if we're in extreme joy, like, maybe people think something's wrong with us, or that we don't deserve it, or that we're crazy, or, I mean, I don't know. Those are the ones that pop up for me.
Yeah, or we just get so conditioned to, like,
Yes.
it's busy, or my pain is bigger than your pain, and, my stress is bigger than your stress, and it's
Oh,
just so messed up.
just addicted to the complaining, or yeah.
And I
Yeah.
love this question because I feel like you can just keep asking it for the rest of your life, right? Because
Yes.
there are always places where we can just keep opening to that.
Yes. Yeah, how much forgiveness could you offer so that you can find more harmony? How much could you let go of judgment? Boy, like right now, and with all the COVID, like every morning when I open up Facebook and it's like, you blah blah blah, like both sides of the wall, fighting and shouting at each other, and it's like, wow, how good could we let it good? Could we stop the division and all that? There's so many ways. Yes, great question for life.
For life. I love it. And I'm curious, like, to dive into, your path a little bit more, like, personally, and also, what your shamanic learnings, wisdom, and also animals, like, how can they help us? Like, how can someone who doesn't really know anything about this open to this kind of wisdom in their lives?
Yeah, well, maybe we start with the animals. The animals are, when you're walking out in the woods or even in your yard, and maybe you've got some birds or some squirrels or, some deer visiting, just to pay attention, because the animals are really like the walrus. They tend to be sort of, living surrendered to themselves, their essential nature. They're innocent. They are not, um, yeah, and they don't appear to be in their head. So a lot of times they're just in flow. Like, I was just thinking, a couple weekends ago, we were in a place where we were watching seagulls, and like, the sun was rising, so it was like pitch dark except for the sun was starting. But like 20 minutes before the sun, even in the dark, all these seagulls had taken to the sky, and they were just having like the greatest time. They were just like soaring and flapping and twirling and swirling and expressing themselves, of course. And um it was just like almost this giant dance party waiting for the sun to come up. And then when it came up, I mean, then they were just soaring and they kind of got more expansive, and it was just amazing to watch them. So I think that animals, creatures of all kinds, can show us sort of a million different ways. They show us how to be, because I think as humans, we tend to get where we get the most stuck is when we're operating from our head. And
Yes.
as a former
Guilty,
intellectual,
guilty, guilty.
yeah. And I think the animals help us to drop back into our bodies, our hearts, our awareness, our presence, because they're present, whereas we've sometimes gone missing, we're off in future land, or we're off back in 1975 thinking, oh my God, that leisure suit I wore was so bad. What was I thinking? Whatever it is, we're just in our heads. And so I think that's one thing. So one thing you can just play with is just, today just we're going to talk about intention setting. So what you can do is you can set your intention. Today, I'm open to receiving and would like to receive a message from a wild animal who can help me on my path. And you might even set the intention to get a message about a specific issue, like your relationship or a writing project or your business, growing your business. I mean, all of these things the animals can help with, which sounds crazy. But one example that I love to share, when I first discovered this concept and I had gotten them, this helpful information from the walrus, and I was still wondering if this was a crazy idea, but by now I was like, well, it's kind of helping me, so I'm going to keep going. And at the time I hadn't written, since college, but I had this weird urge during my sabbatical from medicine to write a book. Had no idea how to do that, but I was like, I think I want to write a book and just share some quote wisdom, although I'm not sure I had much accumulated, but I had something to share, right? So that day I was like, I was getting really frustrated about how to write a book, no clue how to do it. So I went outside and I just said, please send me a beastie universe that can help me. So I went on a walk in and around my neighborhood, went into the woods, really didn't notice much. And I was just kind of disappointed when I got home. I was like, could you just have like coughed up like maybe a soaring hawk or like something grand? I've heard there are wolves in these woods. My neighbor saw one the other day. Like, I would like that. Something big, like show me something, right?
Of
Set the bush
course,
on
yeah.
fire, universe. And of course, I sat down and I was like, I did not see a dang thing that really captivated me. Because really, you want to notice what is, ringing your bell? What do you really notice? And I was like, well, I did see those ants. There were these ants. I don't know why. It was like the one thing that stood out. And so I wrote in my journal, I saw these ants. And then I was, kind of kvetching into the journal about how they weren't very helpful. And then I was just like, I started thinking more about ants. I was like, oh, ants build these massive castles out of like sand that are huge, but
Mm-hmm.
they don't do it alone. They don't do it in one day. They do it with lots of other helpers, and they just do like one grain of sand the one that I saw was just hauling this giant like grain of sand across the sidewalk. So I was like, okay, what would it look like for me to drag a little grain of sand across the sidewalk today? And so that day I just opened a file on my computer and I, put this title down for the book that I thought might be a title for the book. And I just wrote a few notes about, well, maybe it would have a chapter about this or that. And I closed it. And that was kind of the beginning of realizing, it got me to do something. And it was something that was so easy that it didn't feel terrible. And then I went back and did it again. The next day I was like, well, what else could I do with this? Like, and eventually I had to reach out and call somebody to help me put my ideas together. But that's one really simple way that such a humble beastie as an ant, as humans, we often are very egoic and we think like tigers and bears are very grand, but that the ants really couldn't possibly have anything to teach us. But the profound learning that I've had now is that, every beastie is majestic and has its amazing, amazing qualities of beingness that we can tap into and learn from.
I love this for so many reasons. I will name just a few of them. But the first thing I love is, in any conversation, also just that we have about intention setting, it's just what you're describing. Like, it's like looking at the ants and like opening that file. Like, the step might feel so small, that it's just like these grains of dirt or these grains of sand, but it's like, over time, like we build this life that is intentional and fills us up and is meaningful. So I love that metaphor. And I love it's like also, as you said, like really pausing to notice what's around us. And then in a moment, I want to talk about your Book of Beasties, but this is also, you can totally tell me if I'm wrong, but I think you're also reminding us like to trust also our own inner wisdom. Like, what did the ant and ants mean to you on that day in that moment?
Yes. Yes. In fact, I did write a Book of Beasties, and it's really more of a book to playfully inspire you. But I really want to encourage people, to get your own message, because the messages that you can get are just like infinitely unique to each one of us. Like if we had each seen that ant on that particular day and the exact same ant, but we all have different lives. And what did that ant mean to you? What was its message for you? It might have been something completely different. Maybe the way it was zigging and zagging was like giving you freedom to try different things. Or maybe the way it slowed down to bask in the sun was a lesson for you to rest and relax. That's what's so beautiful about it, that it's just unique.
It is. It's amazing. I have to say, so I love that, but and I love books like yours because sometimes I am curious. I'm like, well, what else could this mean that I
Yeah.
couldn't imagine? To kind of open up my aperture to notice like those characteristics about walruses. Like I can't, maybe I've seen one once or twice. You know what I mean? So I'm not
Yeah.
as familiar with them, and not that one's crossing my path today, but
Right.
I also, the Book of Beasties is so wise and informative, but I also love your playfulness with it.
Yeah, I think that's just it's like when I first got on this path, what I realized is how scared I was and how tired I was, and how, like, when we've had our life kind of fall apart, whether it's you've gone through divorce, you've lost a job, or you've realized a career just doesn't hold the juice anymore, your house is burned down to the ground. I mean, after something catalytic like that happens, you feel exhausted, you might feel scared. And I realize what we really need is a lot of love, and we need a lot of understanding and kindness and playfulness, because some of the stuff I would read about animal spirits was like terrifying.
Yeah.
Like, oh my gosh, like I don't want to read that. Like it was like death may be impending. And at the time, like I didn't even know what metaphorical death was. Like now I have a full understanding of that. But at the time I was like, oh my God, I'm gonna die. This is like I was just so wound up. So I really wanted to create something just almost childlike, but not childish, but childlike, with that sense of wonder.
Yeah, it's amazing. And so can you tell people like what they could, because I also feel like that is maybe a little bit different in format from your new book, but also a book like that's a reference book that you could go to all the time, anytime you want to look something up.
Totally. And you can use it. Let's do it today like a divination, which means, we're just going to open the book to we say random page, but we say in the shamanic world, like nothing is random. So everybody who's listening to this, set your intention that you're going to get a message from a beastie that's going to be helpful. And Adrienne and I will set our intentions. And I'm just going to crack it open to a page. Okay, we got the Caracara. Now this is a rare. Most of the beasties in this book are pretty, like, you've heard of them. They're there's like
I don't
160.
even know if I've heard of this, to be
So the
honest.
Johnny Rook is quite a rare. It's a rare raptor, but a very special raptor. And I included this in the book because I got to know this beastie through a friend of mine, Marta, who is really awesome. So the themes of this are courage, resourcefulness, mischief making, and social hierarchy. So maybe shall
Mm,
I just read
please.
I'll
Yes, I'm
just
very
read the
curious
main
about this.
message. So the Caracara, a fine falcon, also known as the Johnny Rook, has a reputation for being a highly mischievous and extremely assertive animal. These fierce-looking birds thrive in the harsh conditions of the Falkland Islands and are no strangers to adversity. This glorious rogue bird has stepped into your world to say that it's time for you to adopt a take no prisoners approach to life. With Johnny Rook at your side, you can come out on top, even and especially in less than favorable scenarios. These magnificent scavengers are not afraid to throw themselves into the scuffle to get what they need. Maybe toilet paper. Caracara is here to remind you that sometimes a true power is seized, not gifted. If you have been sitting on the sidelines for a while, Caracara can show you how to get back in the game and with the power of shenanigans, nourish yourself and grow. Do it for the sheer adventure of it all.
Wow, I love that. What does it mean to you today? I'm happy to
So,
share too.
yeah, let me think about that. Well, I think it's just having the sheer audacity to keep going, even no matter what my results apparently are out in the world,
Yeah.
I think because I think I can get caught up in like, like I'm a failure in this and that, or I haven't really accomplished much, or this, there's that perfectionist or that constant driving thing inside of me. And this just reminds me like it can be fun. There's a wonderful video of these Johnny Rook birds. These people are camping. These National Geographic photographers were camping on in the Falklands. Like I don't think anybody else camps in the Falklands, but anyway, they were there. And these Johnny Rooks like broke into the camp and like just destroyed like everything, got into their backpacks, like pulled everything out, were like eating their breakfast. And that's when they caught them on film because they had gone out for a walk. And but they're very like, yeah, they have this massive personality and they thrive in these like rough conditions. And I think right now is a time when, wow, it's a little bit like the Falklands Islands out there for many of us who are trying to figure out how to make a living given challenging circumstances, or how to raise, do homeschooling and make a
Yes.
living at the same time out of the same house. Yeah. So I think for me, yeah, just remembering like have fun and have courage, keep going.
I agree. Like I was just thinking, because when I was meditating this morning, I was just thinking about a specific situation. I was like, why, like I was in that, why isn't this working out? And like the message that was coming through was like, because, sometimes when I'm backed in a corner or frustrated, I do my best creative work, it makes me do it. So it's kind of like the message was these things get thrown at you because you're meant to keep creating, and then that also we were talking about earlier, that also it makes me happy and it gives me energy, and that's when I feel in the zone. So it's just funny, and I like the mischievous part of it because
Yes.
sometimes that is fun for me, the little bit of like let's have a little sass in this.
Yeah. Right. Like have that playfulness there.
Well,
And
because we
then,
forget how to play. Sorry.
oh
Yeah.
no, go ahead. Go ahead. Yeah.
I was just going to say, we forget to just have, I need to remind myself of that all the time, and especially, having my own business, that there are things that I don't enjoy doing, but I was like, how can we have a little more, like you did this because you want to experience more joy and create joy. So it's like, how can these tasks be joyful? And I just find when I remind myself of that and invite the playfulness, my shoulders drop, and my whole perception just shifts.
Absolutely. Like it doesn't have to be slave labor. It can be, it's just it's our intention, right? Like
Yeah.
let's let this be playful. On the second page, like the book has like 2 pages on each beastie, and the second page is about chakra, vocation, your creativity. So little special messages. And for the Johnny Rook, it's the solar plexus is the chakra. And so it's talking about like your inherent worth and really embracing, your attributes. And there's an exercise in here, there's just lots of ideas to get you thinking. So it's kind of a playful book to like, you could do a beastie a day, you can just be like, okay, I need some kind of message, like just open it and see what shows up. Or you could notice, oh, there are crows in the backyard, which seems very ordinary, but what might that mean? What possibly could crows be trying to tell me?
It's amazing. And you must hear so many interesting stories about people using this book.
I do. I think I was just thinking, like patting myself on the back, like, good job, Sarah, for writing this book. Because usually, like, my friends will call me and they'll be like, you're not going to believe what I just saw. And I'm just like, what? And they're like, okay, you know how we've never seen a moose in like 7 years, right? And I'm just like, yes. She's like, okay. And then they break it down, like, and then they're just like, and then it was there, and it was this giant moose, and it was bigger than the car, and we were freaking out. And then of course our camera dropped, and we couldn't. I don't have any pictures, but you had to be there, and it's just. I think that's something that even, as kids, we love it. But then as adults, there's still that wonder and delight in seeing, just observing and paying attention to these beasties. Like the last few days when I've been walking into my office, there's been this crow and it's like in this tree and it's just funny. And it's like 3 days in a row now. And I'm like, okay, maybe you're trying to, there's something here, and just seeing their beautiful wings and, they're all so incredible. They just, yeah. And remind us of our own beauty and our own magnificence, because, if you can recognize in a hummingbird, that iridescence, that like fierce grace they embody. Like I always just remind people, like, if you can admire it in them, like you also possess those qualities, and how could you bring those out in yourself? So whatever beasties you admire, that's another kind of cool, fun angle to play with.
And it can change over time, right? Like, because
Yeah.
I had someone ask me the other day, she was just starting to look at animal spirits and was asking me. I said, I'm no expert, but I said, all I know is, sometimes, yeah, different things also show up to guide you. Like, there doesn't have to be just one that is your
Right.
overarching. Is that right?
Yeah, I tell people, I call them core beasties. Like most of us have at least one core beastie, or the beastie that's sort of with you for your whole lifetime.
Okay.
And that can change, but usually it's pretty stable. Sounds like a physician. Sounds pretty stable. And then the other one I like to think about is a guest beastie. So that's just like a beastie that shows up maybe for a minute, an hour, a couple months, or maybe over a year. Like, your grandmother dies, and during that time, like you just cannot, like dragonflies just keep showing up everywhere, and you just somehow making this connection that it has to do with her, or it has to do with this loss. And and they're there to help you through a particular leg of the journey. But the core beasties, yeah, they tend to really have greater, like more broad lessons about how we can live better for ourselves.
So if somebody didn't know what their core beastie might be, is there a way that they could find out?
Yes, there is. Well, there's a simple way, which is just asking yourself, like, is there a wild animal that you've been obsessed with since young childhood? And if so, and you know exactly who that is, that's probably it. And for
Yeah,
some,
like don't overthink it,
yeah,
right?
don't overthink it. Like a lot of people are like, oh, I know what mine is. And I remember once we used to have a podcast, which we did for a few years with animal totems. And this guy was like, he called in and he's like, I can't figure out who my core beastie is. And we're like, well, I was like, well, take a look around your house, because sometimes it's like lying in plain sight. Like, do you collect certain animals? And the guy was just like, oh man. And everybody's like, what? He's like, and he's like, right over his fireplace was this gigantic painting of a wolf. And
I
it's like,
love
it
it.
was right there, but like and then he knew, like he knew, like he knew. So it's one of those things you sort of know. But for me, if you're really intellectual and kind of caught up in your head, like I tended to be, I think I'm getting better. I don't know. But I did a shamanic journey, which is where you do a drum journey, which is sort of like a deep meditation and a guided version of that to go seeking the spirit that's there to help you. And there's one on my website, so people can go there, and if you subscribe at my site, you'll get access to a guided meditation. And I
Oh,
think that's
amazing. We'll include that link so everybody can check that out.
awesome.
What you were going to say something
Oh,
else?
yeah, I just think that's a really great way for a lot of us to do it, because it's sort of like let it be shown to you. Like if we try too hard to figure it out, sometimes that's not the way. We have to kind of like surrender to a meditation and see what's shown to us. And I always tell people we don't always get what we want. Like sometimes we want something grand, like a great sea turtle or something like that. But sometimes we get something unexpected, but maybe it wasn't what we were thinking, but it's actually perfect.
It's funny. I just am thinking back. I was at a retreat center and this whole group of people had done a similar journey, and, every different things were coming up for each person. And one woman got a fruit fly, and yeah, she was very disappointed.
Yeah.
very, upset. But we were all sitting at this communal table for lunch. And, as we started talking and just people started sharing and she started thinking about it and then she thought about it, it had a significance. I don't remember what it
Yeah.
was, but I just remember how upset she was
Yes.
at its very short lifespan. It's tiny, they're annoying, and
Yes.
her perception of it just completely shifted.
I love that. I had this one client, it's probably 7 or 8 years ago, who I did a shamanic healing with. And when we did the spirit said that she needed a spirit animal retrieval. She didn't have a spirit animal. And so we brought one to her. When I told her what it was, like she started laughing. And then, I just don't think she took it seriously, which was okay, but it was kind of like I remember thinking, well, I guess if we don't embrace the gift we're given, we don't, and we can choose whether we want to embrace it
Happens
or
a
not.
lot.
It might not
Yeah.
be for her. And then years later, after that, I got an email from her and she was like, really? And then she repeated the name of the animal. It's just, I kind of giggled, but I was like, well, at least she's getting a sense of humor out of it. So that was good.
It's true. Or sometimes I've just noticed in myself, whether it's this or other things, when there is a lot of resistance, usually it's
Yes.
even that much more important for me to pay attention.
Totally, totally. In time, we accept all things, right?
Absolutely. So Sarah, you just mentioned the shamanic journeying. What do you want to tell us just a little bit more about that
Yes.
aspect of your work?
Yeah. So that's a sort of a long, complex path. But
I
the
know.
shamanic, in brief, in shamanism, the shaman is the person who alters their consciousness through usually drums or rattling. There are other methods, but those are the most common, to access the spirit worlds where they're filled with loving and compassionate spirits. And then they bring that love and compassion and that wisdom back to this world, or that healing back to this world. And so they sort of act like a conduit. And so you don't have to be a shaman to do this work, though. You can do this for your own personal, to help yourself, to help your family. And so altering your consciousness may sound strange, but basically this drum beat that is, from all over the globe, whether you meet with a shaman in South Africa or you go to Australia or South America, Brazil, they will beat the drum with the same similar beat. And this beat, we learn after we do EEGs and electroencephalogram on the brain of people who are listening to this drum beat. They go into a theta brainwave state, which is REM, or like dream sleep.
Hmm.
So that part where you're not asleep and you're not awake, but you're starting to slip into sleep, and maybe sometimes you get some powerful images, but you're still awake. So like if somebody walked in the room, you would immediately know something was happening. It's sort of like that. It's like being in a deep meditation. You're fully aware of what's happening. But there you have the opportunity to access these spiritual realms where, and when I first heard about this, I was like, what? I was like, what are you talking about? Like, I'd never even heard of animal spirits until, I don't know, I
Yeah.
lived a very sheltered life, apparently, up until at 42 or 43 years old. But what I learned when I went on my first shamanic journey is I had this interaction with this animal spirit, and it was like so much love and compassion. I just wept and I felt loved and cared for. And it was so overwhelming that I was like, wow. Like when I came back from it, I was like, I don't know if this is real or if this is not real, but all I do know is that I just experienced like the most intense, just peaceful, loving acceptance. And I was like, wow, I think I would like more of that. So I just continued to go back and visit this beastie who was so wonderful. And eventually I just decided, well, I don't know that it's something I can ever prove. I don't know that anything can ever be proven, but I
Hmm.
know from my own experience that it's helping me and it guiding me and helped me those spirits have helped me find my way and helped myself and a lot of other people. So So for me, I sort of validated it. And that's really, I think of the shaman as being like a scientist. It's not like I'm saying, oh, Adrian, believe in animal spirits. They're really powerful. It's so great. And if you don't, you should just believe in them. It's no, I'll drum for you. And let's see like what happens when you go visit, like who do you meet and how does that feel? And whatever they shared with you, does it feel true? Or does it help you somehow to go back to your life and be fearless and courageous and all those things we were just talking about, that Johnny Rook, living resourcefully and beautifully. And if it does, well, awesome. Then you're going to really like this road. It's not an easy path, but it's a beautiful path, a worthy path. Yeah. So I highly recommend anybody who's interested, just try out the shamanic journey and see what happens.
Who would have thought, right? Like what would you have thought? I don't know how long, like 20 years ago, if somebody had said you would be here now, what would you have thought?
I mean, you cannot, it's like, I always just think life, you cannot make this stuff up. You just can't. Like if you had told me that, I'd be like, you're crazy. Looking back, it's really funny. When I first met my husband in medical school, I was a big reader. He wasn't as much of a reader, but we both agreed that our favorite book thus far, one of the books that we had agreed on, was the book Clan of the Cave Bear, which, looking back, I think that's kind of interesting because we're both sort of on a shamanic path now. He's still practicing and loving it, but also, pursuing this path for his own personal well-being. But I think that book was all about like being connected to the earth, herbs. I mean, of course, there was a lot of like hot sex in it too, I'm sure, but we were into it for the anthropology, right?
Well, it's all good, right? It's all good.
Right. So
that's amazing. So thank you so much for all of this. And I know that lots of people are going to want to pick up your new book in June. So I want you to remind us of the title, that amazing question, where they can get it. We'll post all of your social media, but tell us all the ways we can connect with you.
So the book is How Good Are You Willing to Let It Get? Daily Feel-Good Inspiration for Creatives, Healers, and Helpers. And you can go to followyourfeelgood.com. And there you can find all the pre-order links and the order links. You can order it from your independent bookstore. You can pre-order it from Amazon. And if you upload your payment, how you purchased it, you'll get another free guided meditation from me about how to find your why and, to really embrace your gifts. And then if you go there, also, if you subscribe, you'll get these, I'll make sure that you get everything when you go there. I'm going to change that. Yes. So you'll get, also the guided journey to connect with the core beastie.
Amazing. Yeah. And what about on social media? Where do you like to interact?
I'm a Facebook lady and I'm an Instagram lady.
Okay.
I am on the Twitter, but I don't understand it. It confuses me.
I don't like it either.
And LinkedIn, I'm there, but I don't really know why. But maybe something's going to happen someday there. I don't know.
I'm with you. And I also love, I don't know if you do it on Instagram, so you can correct me, but on Facebook, often I also see your gratitude attacks, which just always make me smile.
Yeah, I think that's one of the best medicines out there. It's like the highest vibe, love and appreciation. And it's like, if we can just take a few moments to be grateful for the little things, it makes life, it helps us to refocus.
Absolutely. So with that, I am grateful for you. I'm grateful for your time today. I'm grateful for all of the work that you put into the world, and just keep it coming.
Thank you so much. And I'm so grateful for you and all the beautiful products and things that you have fearlessly and courageously worked to get out there, because I know those things take a lot of focus and chutzpah. So thank you.
They do. Thank you. Thank you for listening. May some of the wisdom shared here inspire your most intentional living. For more information about this episode, this podcast, intentional living, and my work in the world, please visit mayyouknowjoy.com. You can also find my May You Know Joy and Seeds of Intention cards there, and my book, Intentional Days. You'll also find details for the Intentional Days membership, where you can gain access to a thriving community of intentional souls and lots of regular inspiration. I've got you covered. Until next time, I wish you great joy and many intentional days.